Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my dominant heron, boars and sows, gats and gittens, comic fans the world over. I got a global reach here, friends. Welcome to another edition of Ask Chuck Dixon, thrill-packed, thought-provoking, world-expanding. Let's not waste any more of your valuable time. Eyes on the road, and first question, Dara O'Sullivan. When you're not writing, reading, or watching movies or TV shows that you recommend to the viewers of your channel, how do you spend your time? What are your hobbies? For some reason, you seem like the type of guy who likes fly fishing, but I might be way wide of the mark. Yeah, that one made my wife laugh. Me fishing. Oh, might be nice. There's an awful lot of fishing down here in Florida, but I've never done it. Well, I did. I did when I was a kid, and I just had a terrible time with tangled lines and things and never went back. I used to hunt small game, but that was many, many years ago. For hobbies, when I'm not writing or keeping up with an exercise regime, my only real hobby is I paint toy soldiers. No, I don't paint wargaming miniatures. I paint toy soldiers. These are larger figures. I mean, I don't want to get persnickety about it, but a lot of people just assume when I say that I'm painting wargaming miniatures. No, I don't do that. I don't wargame. My youngest son is really into that stuff, but I'm not. I mean, it all looks cool, but there seems to be a lot of rules. Anyway, I've done this since I was a little boy, painted toy soldiers, and just really never, like my addiction to comic books, I've never outgrown it. And not to bore you too much, but I generally paint in the medieval range, the Crusades. This is part of my Muslim army. These are like 60 millimeter tall, if you're at all curious. And if you're still listening, I promise I won't go on and on about toy soldiers. I also like the Victorian Wars, the Boxer Rebellion, the Zulu War. I've painted tons and tons of figures in that area. I always say I don't paint toy soldiers, I paint armies. And the Roman era, which one of my favorites. I've painted, I think, over 1,000 soldiers, Roman legionnaires, and their barbarian enemies, both Celts and ancient Germans. So, but actually, I haven't painted any toy soldiers in like 6 months. I've just been really, really busy with work and family and all the rest of it. So, but I'll get back to it. Gentle Savage. Mr. Dixon, are there any types of character traits that you find difficult to write, or have you ever found difficult to write in a story? Also, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? Boy, you slipped in a twin spin there on me. I think I have the hardest time with challenging characters who are hard to predict. I've always said the hardest character I've ever had to write was Ralph Wiggum, because he speaks in non sequiturs. The source of the humor with Ralph Wiggum is complete surprise. He's going to say something no one's ever said before. So I barely ever included him in stories because of that bar. He's not an ancillary character you can just provide fill-in expository dialogue, because Ralph doesn't do that. Ralph is the punchline every time he appears, and he's difficult to write. So I avoided him, and that kind of character generally is difficult to write. Deadpool, very much the same kind of character. In addition, he's sort of mocking and mean and profane and everything else. He's a wise ass, and I've never wanted to write that kind of character. I don't really relate to that kind of character. I'm not putting that kind of character down. I find Ralph Wiggum hysterically funny, and I enjoy the Deadpool movies. I have yet to read a Deadpool comic book, but I enjoyed the movies. They are as close to a guilty pleasure as I'll ever get, those movies, because I tried to explain to my wife why I like them, and I failed. She still thinks they're incredibly stupid. So, So a Deadpool or a Harley Quinn. I mean, I wrote very little Harley Quinn, and then Harley Quinn kind of evolved over time to become very much like Deadpool. And the thing these two share is that they are fourth wall breaking characters who are basically stand-ins for the reader. They are the embodiment of the comic book geek placed into a comic book story. And it's just never attracted me. It's never been the kind of character I wanted to write. I can't remember why I put Superman in here. I had a reason for that. Oh yeah, yeah. You asked about superpowers, and I think everybody thinks, oh, I'd like to fly. It's like, I don't know. Flying would, I've written about this in comics. I've had flying characters in comics. I've written comments on this. Yeah, flying would be cool for a while. It's like owning a pickup truck. Everybody thinks you're going to help them move. If you flew, people could actually fly. People would just be asking you to fly all the time. Or could you fly this over there for me? Or could you fly up there and get that? It's like a tall person at the supermarket. Could you fly me around? Give me a ride. And that would get a little tiresome. Also, flying long distance would be really boring, wouldn't it? You're just sort of flying. And there's not even a control panel to take your mind off of things. There's nothing to pay attention to. You're just flying, flying, flying. And, when I see stories where characters, like fly across the ocean, addressed this in Birds of Prey and more recently addressed it in My Sister Suprema, what a drag it would be to fly across an ocean. Even if you were going at, Mach 3, it's still going to take time. It's going to be, oh, guys, the same view over and over again. Now, a superpower that I would like to have, and I think about this one almost every day, I would like to have Wolverine's claws when opening packages. I think my kryptonite is cellophane. Get something wrapped in cellophane, and it seems to take forever to get it open. So I would like to, especially in this world where we order everything online and packages are coming nearly every day, I'd like to have Wolverine's power. The healing thing would be cool too. Christopher Cohen, thank you for answering my questions below today. Okay, I don't quite understand that. Anyway, yeah, okay. I previously answered questions by you. I get it now. I take these things from your emails, so he's referring to the email. Now that we know that Way of the Rat screenplays are written, are they available to read? And are you able to show us the movie poster that was done if you had it or a photo of it? There used to be a picture up on the internet, and like a fool, I never downloaded it for our cover. It was shown at an Asian film festival. The poster was a rather large poster, kind of vague, nothing real interesting. There were no characters on it. It was basically a picture of the city, copied from Jeff Johnson's drawings of the city where all the action takes place. And, and it had like a coming soon, 2024 or 2004 kind of thing on it. So it really wasn't that special, but I didn't download it because like a fool, I thought, oh, the internet's forever. It'll be here again later. No matter how many years I look for it, it'll still be here. And I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but I can't find it. Maybe one of you can. As for the screenplay, I mean, I have a copy of the third screenplay. And if I had it in Word, I would share it with you, but I don't have it in Word. But I will say that it made the top 10 unproduced screenplay list. And I'm guessing 2003, 2004. So I'm sure they're still on the internet. If you go back and you look for the lists of top 10 screenplays for each year, I think Variety did the lists. And if you go back, it lists top 10 screenplays for movies that had yet to be produced. And boy, that'd be kind of a real rabbit hole to go down to. I may have suggested, I may lose all of you down this rabbit hole, because wouldn't that be interesting? I may do that myself later today. Look at some of those and see which ones were produced and which ones weren't, because I'm sure some of them eventually made it to the big screen. So there you go. John Bua, how important is the superhero's origin? Should you start with their origin and move forward? Well, you don't have to. You don't have to. I mean, the, the format is for the longest time was the superhero has his origin. You know, he gets bit by a spider, or drinks a special serum, or or is standing next to a cabinet of chemicals that get hit by lightning. And then he's decides to immediately put on a costume, and by the end of that issue, he's met his first supervillain. And then in the preceding issues, he meets his nemesis, the supervillain that they took more time to think about, create his nemesis. And then around issue 5 or 6, he meets his double. I mean, this is something that every superhero comic did when I was a kid. But you don't have to start with the origin. Wouldn't Batman be just as engaging if we learned the reasons he exists later on instead of right away? I think Spider-Man's origin is important, though, because you have to introduce Peter Parker. Spider-Man is really the story of Peter Parker, let's face it. And you have to kind of start there so you understand his motivations and what these changes in his life mean to him. And why he chose that costume and all the rest of it. And also because some of his abilities are not powers. I mean, shooting webs is an invention of his. So all of that stuff I think really needs to be set up to have the character be engaging and make sense. Now you can flip all this on its head. A number of years ago, these are drawings by Flynn Henry, concept drawings for covers and things. I did a character called Iron Ghost, which was created by me and Flynn Henry and Sergio Cariello. And the Iron Ghost, we don't get an origin until the very end of the story, because I kind of wanted to stand the whole masked vigilante thing on its head. And what the Iron Ghost really is a whodunit mystery. And whodunit is the Iron Ghost. But we don't know who the Iron Ghost is. And in true Agatha Christie fashion, I present the reader with like 5 possible people in the story who could be the Iron Ghost, and it's not revealed to the very end which one of them it was. And so his origin really doesn't come till later, and it's very brief. It's just in it's more inferred than stated. So the Iron Ghost, by the way, is set in the final days of World War II in Berlin. And Iron Ghost is basically going around making sure that high-level Nazis guilty of war atrocities will not get away. They will not be going to Bolivia. Now, the Horseman is, I'm kind of taking, again, the mass vigilante thing and turning it around a little bit. And, some readers have complained the first appearance of Horseman, we really don't know why he's doing this. We really don't know much about his background and everything else. Well, that was intentional. I wanted to engage you from the beginning in the character and his relationship with his family, much the way that learning about Peter Parker is important to understanding and liking Spider-Man and enjoying Spider-Man. Learning about Hector and his relationship with his sister-in-law and his nephew is integral to the story, and that I wanted to concentrate on that first before I got back. Because let's face it, this is a mass superhero action story. At this time, after almost 90 years of this genre being around, do you really, as a reader, need all that much explanation? It's like opera. It's like going to the opera and going, why are they all singing all the time? Somebody explain this to me. You're a superhero fan. You accept a lot. Your suspension of disbelief, you mailed it off, to the Philippines. It's gone. So there was no need, and I sort of play with that. Now in the second appearance of the Horseman, and then there's a third appearance following shortly after, we learn more about his background, a lot more about his background, who he is, and what makes him tick more. But really, at the beginning of the story, the only thing that's important is his relationship with his family, and then page after page of kick-ass action drawn by Joe Bennett. Now, a character like Brian Solari, staying with the Rippaverse, I mean, this guy is a total archetype. This guy is obviously a Superman type character, and nobody asks. Funnily enough, people would say, well, we want to know more about the Horseman. Why didn't you provide more background? Nobody asked for background on Brian Solari. They just accept this guy is the Superman of this universe, and we're all cool with that. But in the Great War of Separation, which is, being announced tomorrow, but this video won't appear for a couple of weeks. So a couple of weeks ago, they announced the Great War of Separation, book 1. And in that, we will get Brian Solari's origin, who he was before and how he became this guy. And I think it's going to surprise you, especially you stock Rippaverse fans who think Brian Solari's origin. And it is not like the others. Jason Zeller, who I accidentally put in all caps. Sorry, you didn't type this in all caps, I did. Just wanted to say I enjoyed the first 2 Conan novels and wanted to check in and see if there's a volume 3 in the works or if you plan on continuing the series later. I've answered this question before, but I'll answer it again because I can't expect you people to watch all of these or stay awake or, not be distracted by traffic. Anyway, I wrote a 3rd one. It's called The Pit of the Blind God. And it's written, but Castalia Press, who was publishing these, got a cease and desist from the Conan people, and basically from Titan, through Titan Books. And yes, Conan's in public domain, and we were free to write about him. But we would, Castalia would still get taken to court, and possibly I would get taken to court too for writing it. And so it would cost money to fight it to prove that it's public domain. It just wasn't worth it. This is how lawyers work. A lot of times they know they're wrong, but they can win anyway. That said, the cease and desist was delivered in the most cordial manner possible, and our relationships, both Castalia Press and my relationship with Titan over Conan, is very, very good and very, very amenable. And Titan made it clear that they really liked the books, and they liked renewing their relationship with me over Conan, because I have a history with Conan, having written so much of it for Marvel. And they said they really welcomed these Conan novels by me, and they would publish them. Now, I haven't heard anything back, and I really need to step it up. All this stuff happened over the holidays, and I really need to step it up and get back in contact with them, mostly just to get answers for you folks, because so many people, you are not the only one who's asked me this. And I appreciate it. I appreciate that you really want the 3rd one, because you like the first 2. And I want to get back to it. And quite frankly, I'm reading this great big book about Genghis Khan, and it's all this information I had never read before, and it makes me want to write Conan more. So I got a whole bunch of ideas for Conan coming off of reading about the Genghis Khan and the Golden Horde and all that stuff. So yes, it will be, but I can't tell you when. It'll be a new edition with new covers. It'll be from Titan. I don't know if they're going to collect all 3 together, publish them all separately. I really have no answers on that. I wish I did, because I'd like to know too. I'm kind of curious. But I promise to get on that and get you some answers. But, Pit of the Blind God has been written for like maybe over a year. I mean, it's completed. We were ready to go to press with a cover and everything. But they said, stop, you don't own that. Shane Rodenbeck, I've heard you bring up a story that DC turned down where you had Batman going into an apartment building where he got shot. A little boy let him in his apartment to hide for the bad guys. I was curious, could you be able to use this story for ICYMI or even maybe Horseman? To me, that story would be fascinating to read. Yeah, I can't see why not. And actually, I thought about this because people had asked, when people first asked about this, or I first brought it up on my own, because nobody knew to ask about it. I began to think, well, I love that story, and I wish I could use it somewhere. And The Horseman is a terrific opportunity to use that. And I was actually thinking, where would that fit in a story? And the thing is, it was written as a one-off single issue comic. And it's funny. I mean, Rippaverse, it publishes basically graphic novels, trade paperbacks. And I just today found out from them that they're talking about, I just found out today, which for you was a couple of weeks ago, that they're looking at shorter format books, not pamphlets, but shorter than trade paperbacks. So something like the prestige books that DC used to put out, 48, 52 pages. And that would be a good story for one of them. Because I kept trying to think, how would I fit that into a larger story? I mean, there's no reason I couldn't. I could have figured out how to fit it into a larger story. But, how would I do that? But I mean, basically I'm saying, yeah, I'm going to take that story. And it's mine. I wrote it for a Batman story, but the concept is free for me to use. They never published it. I was paid for it, but they don't own that concept, is what I'm trying to say in my own inarticulate way. David Zwally, I'm sorry. I hope you're doing well. In a previous episode, you mentioned a pseudonym you've written under. For some reason, I can't find the clip. What other names have you worked under? Yeah, I wrote 2 Westerns for Wolfpack under their house name, A.W. Hart. And they were Solomon's Mine and Prince of Lies. And they were a lot of fun to write. I had a good time. I love writing Westerns. And that's one of the times I used the pseudonym. Another time I used the pseudonym was back when I was writing children's books. I wrote a Golden Storytime book of Raggedy Ann and Andy Go Flying. And the publishers at Western said, well, we can't put your name on it. Raggedy Ann and Andy Go Flying, written by Chuck Dixon. I mean, that's, so you need to use a female pseudonym. So I used my grandmother's maiden name, Mary J. Fulton. So I wrote a book under the name Mary J. Fulton. And this is why I didn't work in children's books very long. I just, couldn't resist saying, they were created by a guy. Johnny Gruelle wrote about 100 of these things, and nobody cared that a guy was writing Raggedy Ann and Andy. But that didn't go over well. And I think that's the last time I worked there. Oh, Ace Mowick. For those who want to pursue the task of collecting as many issues of Heavy Metal magazine as they can, do you know a specific year where the quality dips that could be considered a cutoff point? And could you elaborate? I guess that's what I'm here to do, is elaborate. I was very excited when Heavy Metal premiered here in the United States, because I had been reading Metal Hurlant, I guess that's how you pronounce it, which was the French magazine in which, if you were paying attention back in the 70s, exposed you to Mobius and Philippe Durier and Mézières and Enki Becal and all these great French and Belgian comic artists working in the science fiction area. And then I was very excited to learn that the National Lampoon people were going to create this magazine, Heavy Metal, which is a loose translation of Metal Hurlant. I think Metal Hurlant actually means screaming metal, which would have been a cooler title, certainly. Would have gotten attention. But anyway, they called it Heavy Metal. I guess the Rock and Roll Association. And I was really, really excited. And I bought a whole bunch of the first issues. And they were basically English translations of stuff I'd already seen in Metal Hurlant. And but after a while, as you say, the quality waned as they began to mix in more and more American and British stuff into the magazine, which, some of it was good, most of it was subpar. It wasn't quite equal to what the others were doing. And so I'm not going to say, I mean, my collection of Heavy Metal is actually rather small. I mean, like I have a stack of, if you had all of them, you'd have boxes full of them, but I have like a stack, and largely that's because I, I went through all the ones I had, and I just cherry picked the ones I wanted to keep because there were entire issues of stuff that I either already had in better editions, or uh, and sometimes they were editions in Spanish or French, but I didn't care because um, I just wanted to look at the art and I already knew the story. And so I either sold them or gave them away, those issues. So I just sort of cherry picked through and kept the ones that had, stuff by like Jose Ortiz or uh, Juan Jimenez that wasn't available anywhere else, that I didn't have it in another edition. So my it's scattershot. And then basically over the last 10 or 15 years, I mean, it's just totally gone to hell. I never see anything in there I'm interested in at all. So it's sort of fallen off my radar. So yeah, there's not really an era where, I mean, it's not like Warren Comics where, once you get to the late 60s, there's a fall off point until the mid 70s, the fall off point in quality. And then Warren comes back stronger than ever. Heavy metal really never did that. There was never a resurgence in quality or consistency or anything like that. So I really can't say. So I mean, long story short, I'm just taking the long way home to tell you I don't know. It's up to you. I mean, I don't know what you like or what you would consider good or not, but for me, mostly it was about finding the Burton and Sibe stories by Jose Ortiz, and just keeping them. Comics 616, bonjour. As you use Viper from the Secret Empire in 2 of your Marvel series, Punisher War Journal and Hawkeye, I was wondering if you had any particular affection for her and at the same time some larger plans in mind for this character in this organization. Secret Empire was already presented in your Moon Knight. Yeah, Viper is, I didn't have any long-term plans because at Marvel, I really wasn't in a position to make any kind of long-term plans. I just used her because, she's a hot brunette. She's got that gimmick where half her face is scarred, so she covers it with hair, a la Veronica Lake. That's kind of cool. And her costume's terrific. The bicep level gloves. I don't know what you call it. There's probably a name for them. And the whole bit, and plus she was dangerous and crazy and all the rest of it. And, she was a Jim Steranko creation way back in Nick Fury days. She was with Hydra. And I thought she was a really cool character then. And Steranko did a lot of really neat stuff with her back then. So she was always in my mind. If I wanted a really badass, murderous femme fatale, I would use Viper. So I simply reassociated her from Hydra over to the Secret Empire. So because not a lot of people were using her. I can really only think of one appearance she made in comics in the 80s. I think she was in an issue of Captain America. That's really the only one I can remember. So there's your reasoning. Joshua Ignatowski. I've recently been working on a story where I've been enjoying getting the character moments written, but have found the process of writing a bunch of the action boring by comparison. I get that writing isn't always easy, but I'm wondering if there's a way I can make my time writing the action more enjoyable. Have you ever faced this problem in the past, and how do you make it more fun for yourself to write the action scenes? Well, this is proof positive that every writer is completely different. I dig writing action. I really like writing action. It's the most fun. When I get to when in writing a novel, especially when I get to all my ducks in a row and everything's where I need it to be, Sam and Frodo are climbing Mount Doom, and I know that big action scene that's going to close the story out is coming. I'm like a kid at Christmas, because I know, number one, I'm gonna have a lot of fun blocking out this action scene, and number two, the novel's almost over. The writing chore is almost complete. I'm on the downslope, baby. It's all easy from here. So I like writing action. I don't maybe it's how you're thinking about it, or maybe action is just not is difficult for you, and I understand that. I was fascinated with, as a reader in prose, how action scenes are put together, and so because action scenes are complex, can be complex, and multi-layered, and all the rest. And how do you write that and keep the reader apprised of the situation? I mean, one of the greatest action scenes ever written is the animal stampede in Tarzan at the Earth's Core. Tarzan and his merry band in Pellucidar, are in the way of a herd of woolly mammoths and every other kind of prehistoric herbivore being chased by a pride of saber-tooths. And the scene is pandemonium. If you remember Peter Jackson's King Kong remake, The Dinosaur Stampede, it's that level of chaos and insanity. And it goes on for page after page after page of this incredible dinosaur or creature stampede. And I was just absolutely fascinated when I read it, and I would go back and read it and reread it and reread it, and just sort of like soak it in. Like, how did he do that? How did he make it all clear? Because he had an ensemble cast, and you were kept apprised of where they were in the situation, what new danger they were in, and how they got out of it, and all the rest of it. In the midst of all this very evocative prose about this tidal wave of living flesh that was going to trample everything in its path to goo, and just really, blew my mind. And I do that often. I mean, John Benteen novels. John Benteen wrote. His name was Ben Haas, but he wrote westerns under the name John Benteen, and he wrote these novels called Fargo, and some of them have some incredible action scenes in it. There's a book called Alaska Steel, and it has Fargo on the back of a dog sled being pulled by Malamutes, and he rolls off it into a saloon, firing a gun from each hand. It's like, whoa, and it's so perfectly set up and so evocative, and you can just see it in your head so perfectly. I've spoken before about James Ellroy's first chapter of LA Confidential, which opens on a gunfight, and it's just really muscular, terrific action, and he keeps it clear. Clarity is a big thing here in writing, and really brings you into the moment and the danger and the sounds and the smells. And that's another chapter I read and reread and reread and reread. It's like, how did he do that? How did he, what did he leave out? What did he put in? How did he construct this to make this, picture of mayhem in my head? But if you don't enjoy it, you don't enjoy it, and you're not alone. You're not alone. Gore Vidal, a literary lion, he wrote an essay. Oh man, I don't know if it was for the New Yorker or Vanity Fair or one of those magazines, one of those high tone magazines, about how difficult it is to write action. And he had a really hard time. This guy wrote a lot of novels, and murder mysteries, genre fiction, biography novels. I mean, crazy, crazy stuff. And very, prolific, best-selling author, and perceived as an intellectual. But he said that action stumped him. It was very difficult for him to write action, and he actually cites in the article Edgar Rice Burroughs. And if I remember right, I haven't read this article in 40 years, but if I remember right, he even cites Tarzan at the Earth's Core as an example. But he said, whatever you want to say about Edgar Rice Burroughs, he knew how to write action. And Gore Vidal was saying, I admire that. I wish I could do that more easily. So it's just it's a muscle. It's like anything else. You gotta flex it. So just maybe I've helped you, maybe I've discouraged you. I don't know. But read some action. Read the sample examples I gave you, or go back and reread examples that you remember. Moby Dick. Moby Dick has some incredible action scenes. It's like the first action novel ever written. Melville was really good at it too. So there you go. Don't read the whole book because it'll make you crazy. I don't think anybody's ever read all of Moby Dick. There's a couple of chapters in there you want to skip. Okay, twin spin. Of course, Joshua gets a twin spin. He's working hard for the money. Would you say, Joshua asks, would you say that being an invisible hand style writer allows one's writing to be more easily localized into other languages, since things like poetic prose may not always carry over as well into translation? Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, I've never considered myself a wordsmith. I mean, um, I'll flex that muscle every once in a while. Like when I was writing Conan, I tried to write as much in Howard's style, using Howard's lexicon as much as possible to make it feel like it was written in the 1930s. And so I get a bit purple and a bit more, as you say, poetic in that. I don't know how poetic I got, but I got more purple for sure. And that stuff probably is harder to translate. Books like Levon Cade, Bad Times, things like that. I'm far more direct. Not a lot of compound sentences. More direct in my descriptions. Try to be more evocative. But I'm not really thinking about foreign publications, so I'm not thinking about not making too many colloquial American phrasing or comparisons or metaphors or analogies that would be understandable to somebody who reads English or is an American. So I'm not really conscious of that writing prose, but I think my stuff is, I've been told, is easy to translate. There's a Russian edition of Levon's Trade. I don't know how well it's done, but it's out there. And apparently in Russian, my name is Yak. I guess I'm Yakov. There we go, Yakov Dixon. And Levon this is the first foreign translation. My Bad Times books are in Danish and Italian. It's kind of cool. And they tell me that they were, reasonably easy to translate. So I guess the answer is yes. I'm taking a long time to answer yes and no, and I don't know questions, aren't I? Triple spin. Joshua Ignatowski doggedly hangs on to his position. How long will he last? Do you think that time travel may someday exist in real life, or from a non-linear perspective already does? Well, if time travel was going to exist, it's already here, right? I mean, it could very well be. There's always that theory that the UFOs aren't from other planets, they're from our own future, which, is every bit as believable as them being from another planet. I don't know. I think time is immutable. As much as I love time travel stories, as much as I've written time travel stories, I think it's immutable. In fact, I heard recently that along with gravity, there is no scientific proof that time exists. So they don't know how gravity works. If your school teacher told you they do, they're full of it, because the real hardcore physicists will freely admit we're not real sure how gravity works, because the rules seem to change as you go across the universe. It's one of the only physical rules of the universe that is mutable. That gravity seems to change depending on where you are. Everything else about the universe, all the way down to the subatomic, is totally consistent, except gravity's weird, and time is weird, because we know that time, in a way, is mutable, at least in theory, and actually it's been proven that there's a literal time difference in the passage of time between the poles, the North Pole and South Pole, and the equator. And I can't remember, because I'm not good at math and I'm not good at remembering stuff like that. But time actually passes either faster or slower, depending on where you are on the planet. And I'm talking like, 1/1,000,000th of a second a year. It's not like noticeable. It's not like, I'm going to be 15 minutes late for my Zoom call if I'm at the equator. because my clock's different. This is why we have atomic clocks and everything else to keep up with this stuff. And I'm way past my comfort zone here on science. But you know, the theory of relativity that the faster you travel, if you reach the speed of light, time slows for you, but not for everybody else. And apparently NASA's done some experimentation with that, with guys in space experiencing time differently than we do on the planet. So apparently, like gravity, time is mutable across the universe. And probably everything I just told you is just hogwash, but it's my understanding of it. And for time travel, I wrote 6 books in the Bad Time series, and I'd love to write another one, but my wife says writing time travel makes me act crazy. So I'm going to stay away from that till she's not looking. Look at this. Joshua's getting a quadruple spin. Of course, he earned it. He earned it, my friends. Joshua asks, what do you think Superman's deepest fear might be? I personally don't think it's a fear of being alone, since he had human family and friends throughout his whole life on Earth. I think it is him being alone. We don't know how Superman ages, speaking of time. He may, take a while. He may be around longer. He may see, Lois and Jimmy and stuff, age and die in front of him. So he would essentially be alone. And I think he is afraid of being alone in the fact that he is an alien on this planet. He is, as Batman reminds Robin, he is not human, but he wants to be human. The Kents made him human. They raised him as a human. He sees himself as a human, but he's always aware that he's not, and he wants to belong. This is why he takes on the Clark Kent guys, so that he can be amongst other people and not seen as different. Different because of his powers, and different because, as the citizens of Metropolis learn, he's not from around here. And that way, because otherwise, if you were Superman, you'd just be Superman all the time. Why would you need a secret identity? He doesn't need a secret identity. He doesn't need the money. This guy can, take a piece of coal and make a diamond out of it. He doesn't need the cash. He does not need a job, but he wants to fit in. He wants to be part of a family. So I think his fear would be being alone, not to contradict you. And where would he go? Live in the bottle city of Kandor for the rest of his life? And I don't think that's in continuity anymore. Anyway, sadly, what a fascinating concept. I love the bottle city when I was a kid. And yeah, I think. But what else would it be? Dying? He's obviously not afraid of dying. He's put himself at risk over and over and over again. So yeah, and there's no way he can go back and change the past. He can't restore Krypton. So yeah, he's afraid of being alone. You kind of answered your own question, even though you didn't think you did. J. Morgan Neal, I know, Morgie, you've been waiting to hear the answer to this one. For some reason, I kept losing it in the emails, but here we are. You stirring up trouble again. You notoriously dislike the movies High Noon and Silverado, to much controversy among some. What are some other westerns that don't sit tall in the saddle for you, particularly ones you think are dime store cowboys, aka not true westerns? Now let's settle this once and for all. There's no controversy. John Wayne, no less a person than John Wayne, did not like High Noon. In fact, ended up making Rio Bravo as an answer to High Noon. He didn't like High Noon either, for all the same reasons I don't like High Noon. And also, second unit directors and cinematographers and stuff, over the years have come forward and talked about what a sloppy mess the making of High Noon was, resulting in the same deficits in the story that I didn't like. Fred Zinnemann, director, was indifferent to the movie. I don't think he wanted to direct a Western. The studio assigned him to do it, and he kind of left before the movie was even done. and left it up to second unit and everybody else in editing and studio people to make a movie out of it, because he didn't shoot enough stuff. He left important parts of the story out, and they had to go back. So I stand tall with the Duke, and I don't like High Noon. I'm sorry, I love Gary Cooper. Love Gary Cooper. He's fantastic, but I don't like High Noon. And on the subject of Silverado, no less a person than Lawrence Kasdan, the guy who wrote and directed it, admits that Silverado is a train wreck. He admits this in multiple interviews, and he gives all the same reasons that it's not a good movie that I give for why I don't like it. And from too large a cast, too ambitious a story, no real through story to the movie, no real setup and payoff to any of the situations, subplots left dangling, characters just introduced and really nothing happens with them. He admits he had a chance to write a Western and he loves Westerns, but he blew it. He approached it like, I'll never get to do another one, so I'm going to throw everything but the kitchen sink into this. I mean, there's stuff they had to cut out. I mean, he tried to hit every Western trope ever in one movie, and they ended up having to edit like 45 minutes out of an already long film, because it's like, it's too much. You can't put everything into one movie about the Western era, but boy, he tried. And he even admits there was some miscasting going on and all of my complaints about Silverado. So there's no more controversy. No more controversy. High Noon and Silverado suck. And that's the end of it. Now, let's move on to a recent modern Westerns. Okay, this is from Old Henry. And I liked Old Henry. I didn't love Old Henry, but I liked it. It was what I call a darn good Western. And I enjoyed it. But my problem with all of these current new Westerns is, number one, 90% of them are revenge Westerns. They shot my pa, and they took my little sister hostage, and I want to go get them and kill them all. Okay, great. I love a good revenge Western, but there's other kinds of Westerns. There's many, many kinds of Westerns. There's lighthearted fun Westerns. There's adventure Westerns. There's straight up action Westerns. There's town Westerns and cattle drive Westerns, and who's the best gunfighter Western, and all kinds of things like that. But it seems like we're fed I just saw one with Casper Van Dien and Jeff Fahey, a trailer for it, and it's just the same old revenge Western. It's like, you got this great cast. Why don't you do something different? We weren't really fed a steady stream of these things. Yeah, there's some great revenge Westerns, Nevada Smith, just to name one. But they used to make all different kinds, prison Westerns. And I just like to see a return to that. It's a little bit of variety in the storylines. And there's certainly enough old Western paperbacks you could pick up and adapt. I mean, any Gordon D. Sheriff's novel would make an absolutely kick-ass modern Western, and the same budget as revenge Western. Sheriffs generally wrote about one or two characters in usually Apache territory, and these novels don't have large casts, and it could be easily shot on location in West Texas or Croatia or wherever you want to film, and but they have actual storylines, other than revenge, treasure hunting or escaping from the Apaches or whatever, all kinds of different stuff. So you got to shake it up, and so many of these guys who make these just seem to want to make one kind of Western. Now, let's since I have put Silverado and High Noon to bed, let's stoke the fires under another one. I hate The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And Graham Nolan, if you're listening, I'm sorry. This isn't a good Western. It has all the ingredients of what could have been a great Western. It's got Jimmy Stewart. It's got John Wayne. It's got Strother Martin. It's got, I think Lee Van Cleef's in it. It's got Lee Marvin as the bad guy. I mean, what happened here? And everything went wrong. And one of the things I read about Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is that John Ford, you know, you know, just a John Ford was just a son of a bitch. Let's put it that way. He was a mean guy. He was a nasty guy. Great filmmaker, awesome filmmaker, but just a curmudgeon, hard to get along with. He kind of was broken by the movie The Horse Soldiers, because in The Horse Soldiers, a stuntman died, a stuntman that he felt very close to, and he felt very responsible for the death of that stuntman. And because he insisted on this particular take and everything else, and he felt responsible for the stuntman's death, and it kind of broke him, and he kind of like retreated or withdrew into himself, and he didn't want to take any chances anymore. His confidence had eroded because of the death of this man, and much credit to him, it turned out John Ford did have a human heart. But he goes on to do Liberty Valance, and the movie's so cautious, and it's shot on, if Ford's famous for anything, or most famous for anything, it's the huge vistas, the scale of the West, pulling back the camera, and tiny little figures in a cloud of dust riding in front of those huge towers in Monument Valley. And these are the things these are the impressions, the images we get from John Ford movies, and they are all absent here in Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. There is no attempt at scale. He rarely pulls the camera back. It's almost like he was shooting it for TV, all the way up to the point where they use a Western town set in the movie that is so obviously a TV set. And so many of the scenes, they go to a ranch house, and it's so obviously on a soundstage. It's not outside. And this is a guy not taking any chances. And I understand, but the end result is a bad movie. It's not a good movie. The other complaint is one everybody makes, and Liberty Valance fans try to defend, but it's impossible. Jimmy Stewart was way too old for this role. A younger guy. I mean, imagine Steve McQueen or Paul Newman in this role. Because, Jimmy Stewart and the Duke were basically the same age, but we're supposed to assume that Stewart is younger. There's a bigger age difference. Like, the Duke has wisdom that Jimmy Stewart doesn't have yet, but he would have it because they're the same age. And the arc of the character, where he goes from basically nothing to being, I believe, a state senator or territorial governor or something. He ends up in the end of the movie, because of the events of the movie, holding political office, and a high political office, and being revered and everything else. Well, that arc makes no sense for a guy that was the age of Jimmy Stewart's character. Whereas a younger man, a man in his 20s or early 30s, that arc going from nothing to something would make sense. Nobody later in life makes that leap from waiting tables to running a state. And that didn't make any sense. And John Wayne's the best thing in the movie. Delivers some great lines, some terrific dialogue, and everything else. But in addition to it being claustrophobic and being done on sets that look tired and inauthentic and cheap, Lee Marvin, an actor I absolutely love, was allowed way too much leeway. He is over the top and beyond. He's like in a different movie. It's like he's getting ready to be in Cat Ballou. He is just over the top, and he never comes back. He is out Strother Martining Strother Martin. And his death scene, even when I saw this movie as a kid, his death scene, I was like, seriously? They didn't take another take on this? Talk about hamming it up. And I imagine alcohol was involved in much of this production. So there you go. I have lit the fire. Come at me if you love Liberty Valance. A correction must be made. As Bain says, lo siento. I am very, very sorry. In a recent video, I talked about the little town of Manayunk in Philadelphia. Adorable, lovely little town. Cute, funky place. Great shopping, great restaurants, great bars. And I said that wasn't sure whether or not it was part of Philadelphia, that I thought it was separate. And I have been corrected. A number of you have reached out to say, no, Manayunk is within the Philadelphia boundary, so it is part of Philadelphia. And somebody said it's well within the boundaries. Well, no, it's not well within the boundaries. It's in the very, very northwest corner of the city. It's like an appendage or an appendix to the city. It's not really well within the boundaries. Okay, one more thing. One more thing. And I forgot what the one more thing is, but I'll remember when I see this picture. Yes, Diamond. A whole bunch of you asked me on Facebook, on X, on YouTube, email, blah, 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 everywhere. What do you think about Diamond going belly up? Well, first of all, I think it's chapter 11. So they're in reorganization. They may not be going away forever, but they're in big trouble. And it's not hard to see why. What do I think about it? I welcome it. I really wish Diamond would go away. And you're going to go, well, how are we going to get our comics at our comic book shop? The old-fashioned way, through other distributors. Diamond played a major role in the debacle of comics. It was a business designed to distribute comic books and other materials, but at the beginning, primarily comic books, to the comic book shops, the direct sales comic book shops, and bring non-returnable comics. And the comic book companies loved that non-returnable, and so did Diamond. We're going to sell you these comics, and we never have to see them again. You're stuck with them, buddy. You sell them or whatever. We don't care what you do. Give them away. And Diamond helped, along with primarily DC and also Marvel, to shrink the comic book market down into these, boutique, niche market stores. And Diamond did everything he could to encourage the companies to withdraw from the newsstand. And so I know you're tired of me saying this, but newsstand is the entry level for comics. That's where kids saw comics for the first time. Nobody walks into a comic shop cold. Nobody says to themselves, hey, I wonder what that store is all about. You see comic books as a kid. This flashy, colorful thing on a spin rack or a newsstand, and you go, yo, mommy, can I have this? That's how it begins. That aspect of comic book distribution almost entirely dead. Almost entirely dead. The last gasp is those little Archie digests, the impulse aisle at the supermarket. And they're not even there anymore. I looked the other day, they're not there. They're in the magazine section of the supermarket. And I've never seen anybody buy a magazine from the magazine section of the supermarket. So Diamond helped end an era, unfortunately. And then not only did they end an era, but they killed off all of their competition. There were better, friendlier, more efficient, more reliable distribution companies, and Diamond crushed them out of existence with the help of Marvel and DC. Those three were in bed together big time. And it was a weird environment, especially early days with the comic book stores, because basically comic book stores were run by people who were comic book fans. I mean, nobody who was running a women's shoe store suddenly said, hey, this comic book thing looks good. So no real businessmen, actual businessmen with business experience were opening comic shops. It was comic fans. And I remember over and over and over again, these going into stores, and the guy who owned it, his story was always the same. His origin was always the same. I took my own collection and opened a store, and my inventory was my own collection. And then I was buying comics from customers, and the inventory grew. So they were all the same. And they didn't know how to run a comic store. At the beginning, the money was good in a lot of cases because there was sort of a wave of sales from the 80s into the early 90s that ended abruptly in the early 90s. But there was some good years there. But these guys weren't businessmen. They weren't professional. They just wanted to sell comics and sit behind the counter and talk about comics and just be in comics. They were in the business. They were in show business. They weren't leaving. But a lot of them were prey to the distributors because the distributors come in and say, well, you need this and you need that. And when it was all good advice, the number of comic book shops that did not have a cash register would blow your mind, absolutely blow your mind. never even thought about having a cash register. Never even thought about receipts and things like that. They just didn't know anything about business. And Diamond and Capital and a bunch of the other distributors would try to help out. I don't think it was Diamond, but I think it was Capital actually bought cash registers for their larger customers and encouraged them to use them and showed them how to use them and everything else. But eventually, when, we end up with only Diamond, left in the mix, and there's no other distributor, these comic book shops were prey to Diamond's marketing. And I've, since this bankruptcy has been announced, I've heard one horror story after another, because I've heard these stories for years, one horror story after another about Diamond's abuse, where they would ship you comics that were damaged, and even the slightest little fold or crease to a comic, it makes it, unsaleable to a comic book collector, a true comic book collector. And Diamond wouldn't take them back, wouldn't give them the refund, or just would slow walk them through the system. Missing shipments sent to the wrong store, over shipments, where they would send you more than you ordered, holding out products that you knew would sell to your customers by forcing you to buy another product you knew wouldn't sell. All kinds of stuff, and bait and switch, and all kinds of unethical and possibly illegal business practices that comic book retailers were putting up with, and only the best of them. And I know a bunch of guys who did well in comics. They were smart businessmen. They were diversified. They just didn't own comic book shops. I mean, I know guys that own chains of comic book shops that are very, very successful. But in recent years, they told me it's not about comics. They said if it wasn't for Funko Pops, they would have closed the store years ago. And we're talking about guys that own 5, 6, all the way up to 15 stores. And but with Diamond closing, God closes a door and opens a window. There are other people you can get comics from, and hopefully this will cause a shift in the way that the major comic book companies do business, Marvel and DC. Although, seriously, if you look at market share, Marvel and DC are irrelevant now. They are irrelevant. I know they're a big deal in everybody's head, and we love those characters. I love those characters too. But from a business standpoint, they're irrelevant. Which is why the sales of comics went down in comic shops. This is why they have to sell tchotchkes and posters and statues and Funko Pops and candy and games and all the rest of it, because nobody wants the comics. Nobody reads the comics. Hopefully this will make the comic publishers stand up and notice, because they'll have to move to other distributors. The comic book shops are going to have to turn to Ingram or other distributors, or direct distribution. I mean, just order the stuff directly from DC, directly from Marvel, directly from Dark Horse. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how it's going to shake out. But I promise you this, it's got to get better than it is now, because it's really awful now. The unfortunate thing is a number of comic shops are probably going to have to fold because of this, because they simply don't know what to do. And they're kind of lost. But, a new distribution system will grow up, and hopefully one that encourages competition and allows retailers to order from disparate sources given price, so they can do a little bit more haggling on what they take and what they don't take. So there you go. It was bad news, but it might be good news in the end. If you want to contact me and tell me that I'm completely full of it on Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, you're going to have to go to brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. That's where you can reach me. It's the most reliable way of contacting yours truly. Awesome questions again this week, my friends. I see I did another show over an hour long. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see if we can go for 2 hours. I'll be like those other guys. Let's crab about Disney for another hour. Anyway, I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for subscribing and liking and all the rest. And I will see you again